what I try to talk to families about is start having the conversation about what are your wishes so some stranger doesn't make it for you. And yes, we all want to age in place in our own homes, but how about some what ifs?
Hey y'all, it's Kosta. Today I'm here with my guest, Bill Cohen, Caregiver Support Group Leader, educator and speaker, an Alzheimer's Association volunteer and advocate, certified senior advisor, and the owner of Cohen Caregiving Support Consultants, LLC. Today we're talking about your step-by-step guide to creating a successful care plan. Bill, your journey as a caregiver for your mother has led you to become a certified senior advisor and caregiving support consultant. Could you briefly share with our listeners what led you to this path and how your experience shaped the advice you give to others?
Honored to be here today with you, Costa. Looking forward to our conversation. So, as I like to say, if you had told me about 18, 19 years ago what was going to transpire, and I'd be sitting here talking to you today, I'd say, no way, crazy. Just an incredible scenario. To make a very long story short, my mom used to live in Biloxi, Mississippi. I'm not from there. I'm a New Englander living in Portland, Oregon. But she was showing some signs that caused concern. Agitation, paranoia, not taking care of the house, not taking care of the finances. And we wondered, okay, she's taking care of my late stepfather. He was on hospice, on and off. Was she just getting older, stressed, tired, what have you? And unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to find out if he passed away or went into a care community, if she would bounce back. What happened on the Gulf Coast in New Orleans in August 2005? Katrina, exactly. The house they had lived in for almost 30 years was completely swept away in the storm surge. She had safely evacuated, but she came back fully expecting to see that house still there because it had survived many other storms. Needless to say, the trauma of seeing her house gone and everything in it accelerated, exacerbated whatever was coming on with her. Later, it became obvious it was Alzheimer's. I go into the long-term caregiving mode, doing cross-country travel while holding down a full-time job, started attending a support group, started talking to a care community in Southwest Portland, and like I said, making the trips. First, she was with other family in North Carolina, then Delray Beach. I moved her out to Oregon in 2008. She was less than a year, as we expected, in the assisted living side of the wonderful nonprofit faith-based community, and then she was 4 years in memory care. She passed away from Alzheimer's 10 years ago at the age of 83.
Did you have a care plan in place when all of this was happening?
Oh, no.
Okay.
What was in place, what was starting to happen was I had taken her to a doctor. We did get her on some of the medications that were available and treat her for like anxiety and that type of thing. We had talked about maybe them moving into a care community. We had got me on some of the financial documents. Later, I became POA, advanced director, things like that. But I'm not much different than anybody else. Sometimes it takes an event, not always a hurricane, but something that puts things into action. Unfortunately, too many of us, too many people react in a crisis rather than being proactive and planning like we would all prefer. And of course, when you react in a crisis, you have fewer options. You're acting emotionally and under stress, not the optimal situation.
So, Bill, so much of your advocacy and work is centered around the importance of having a care plan in place, especially for those dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's. Can you break down for our listeners the first step they should take when creating such a plan?
First thing is, no matter what age, you should have your legal documents in place. You should have your will. You should have your power of attorney, trusts if applicable, your advance directive, later in life, the PULST, the physician's orders. The other things are, if you have any concerns or you're thinking ahead, have those conversations. Mom, Dad, what would you like to have happen? Or if you're seeing concern, talk to your other family members. Hey, we need to talk. We need to have a conversation about what's going to happen because there is concern about age, dementia, frailty, whatever. There's so many steps that need to be taken and frequently and too often are not being done. And that includes the what ifs. We all want to be aging in place in our own homes. That would be nice, and actually most people do, right? And it used to be, as we know, that it was more multi-generational extended family, taking care of each other on our own homes. That doesn't happen as much. We're all spread out all over the place. Yes, certain cultures still maintain that, right? But Americans in general do not. We're all over the place.
And it is actually really interesting because the current statistics is that 84% of Americans want to age in place. And what that statistic fails to mention is they age in place until they can't. So there is a period of time towards end of life for about 2 years where typically 2 to 3 years, where they typically have to go to a facility once their disability gets to a certain degree. And as you're talking about these advanced directives, these legal documents that you have in place, when you started this process and you're going to your mom's doctor, for example, you know, something as simple as just getting a diagnosis or getting information on her diagnosis.
Yes, you can get a diagnosis.
Right. So like when you don't have those legal documents in place, how do you even begin to navigate providing care for a loved one? Because it seems like all doors are closed until they're there, right?
Right. We do that and HIPAA and so many other things. So, and many family members will say, well, you're not getting into my stuff. I'm fine. I'll make my own decisions. I'm going to maintain my independence as long as possible. And I'm sure you've heard it. Many of us have, industry or otherwise. Oh, I'm going out of here feet first.
Yep.
I don't need a plan, right?
Right.
So we do face that. But what I try to talk to families about is start having the conversation about what are your wishes so some stranger doesn't make it for you. And yes, we all want to age in place in our own homes, but how about some what ifs?
Sure.
What if you have a fall, something like that, or some other incident, and at least temporarily have to go into a facility to convalesce, to rehabilitate, and then you can probably come home. But we want to have that plan in place. Or once you do come home, who will come in to take care of you for the time being? I'm living thousands of miles away. I can't do it, but let's have somebody on hand ready to go in case that happens. And on the same level, and by the way, I do this not just here in the Pacific Northwest. I collaborate with professionals all over the country. We just talked about one of them is Jenny Conderas with Premier Living Solutions in Ohio. Just as an example, I collaborate with those people all over, and I tell people, okay, sure, you're not ready to go into independent living or assisted living or memory care or an adult care home or residential care facility, but wouldn't it be nice if you found a place that looks nice, way off, could be 5, 10, 20 years off.
Just in case.
Just in case. You have the peace of mind knowing I've made a decision. This is where I'd want to be if I need it. I can put down a deposit and I don't have to worry. And that gives peace of mind not only to the person who would end up there, but also the family, especially the adult children, if there are any.
Right, and that's a great point. I want to, before we talk about the referrals and sort of the network that you've been able to build, I think listeners should know that a lot of these services, and the majority of services when it comes to long-term care, are paid for by Medicaid. And the financial documents that you were talking about at the beginning, by making sure that you have those elements taken care of, is because there's a lot of services that you can't either afford or generally access without having been qualified for some Medicaid program within your state. And so you offer a support plan that includes referrals to vetted service providers and professionals. How can our listeners ensure they're choosing the right service providers for their specific needs?
That's a great question. And I want to go back to when I was first starting with my mom, because back in the mid 2000s, how did you find resources? One, you come from the doctor I just mentioned if you get a diagnosis, but then they say, well, basically keep them safe, keep them out of pain, that type of thing. And it hasn't changed much. Good luck, right? Mm-hmm. Where do I go from here? Where's the treatment plan? Where's the care plan? Where are the resources? And I found that sorely lacking.
Yes.
There are directories. There's so much more on the internet today that was not available back then. However, as you asked, more than a rhetorical question, how do you find good vetted people? So I have, since I started my business, is vet, get to know the professionals in my area and, when necessary, out of the area, that they're going to do a good job for them. They're going to be giving that holistic approach, taking that broad perspective. Many of them are certified senior advisors like myself, and I know that they are looking out for our most vulnerable population.
How do you become a certified senior advisor? I'm just curious.
That's a great question. There is the Society of Certified Senior Advisors in Colorado, and their course can, I believe they can do it in person again, but I took it online. I did it in a few weeks, and then took a very long exam, and it covered everything. A lot of things I already knew, but Medicare, health insurance, long-term care, dementia, just about every topic that would be appropriate or suitable to know about aging and taking care of our aging population. And yeah, there's a fee, but yeah, it was worth it.
As you're looking for providers to join this network or directory that you're building, I know you said that you're looking for kind of a holistic approach. Are there key elements or tenets that you want to see when you're looking at those providers as they provide services? Mm-hmm.
Well, and since you mentioned the holistic aspect, that is something that certified senior advisors do. Instead of looking at things as a single transaction, okay, I'm going to take care of this part of it, say a care agency, and for Mrs. Jones, okay, and Mr. Smith is next. Mm-hmm. Next, instead of thinking, who else does that person need to talk to? Who else does my client need to take care of their care once I'm through with them? Mm-hmm. Are you going to leave them hanging? No, we don't want that. We want to do the whole job. So I look for people, and not necessarily certified senior advisors, but have that mindset. Okay, I'm going to go above and beyond and make sure that even though this is not my specialty or my jurisdiction, shall we say, I'm going to make sure that they're taken care of. And I'm going to connect them with an elder law attorney or a housing advisor or whoever they need. I'll give an example of one client in particular, just pops in my head. It was somebody who is here in Portland, but her family was in Miami, South Florida.
On the complete opposite side of the country.
Exactly. And coincidentally, I moved here from Sarasota, Florida, almost 40 years ago. So yeah, can't get much farther apart. And her mom had dementia, and it was involving her grandmother and her siblings. And we get on Zoom calls and everything else, but they needed various resources, including some of the ones we just mentioned. And I immediately contacted a certified senior advisor with one of the well-known national housing advisors. And I said, I need this, I need this, I need that. And probably they'll become a client of yours because they will need housing at some point. Mm-hmm. And that got everything right back on track. They had the resources they needed, and it gave them peace of mind, especially the daughter here in Portland, 3,000 miles away, or whatever it is. Yeah.
And I mean, you're acting as a conduit, and I think as you're talking, it's important to note that the long-term care space, the services that you would receive or need to receive as you age are extremely complex. They're multifaceted. They're compartmentalized. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring them all together into one network. A lot of people don't realize that housing is extremely important because they think that they're going to live in their own home the entire time.
Right.
But as we were talking earlier, there's a component between living in your own home and not being able to have your needs met because of your disability progressing, but also not wanting to live in a facility. Well, if you are in this quagmire where you're on a fixed income and you don't have enough savings to be able to afford to move to a retirement community, for example, because those houses cost $700,000 a year, I'm sorry, $700,000 in general. What are your options? So I think it's great that you've built out this directory and this network so that you can provide people with actual solutions that are really, really complicated.
Exactly. Yeah, I like to call them my A-team.
There you go.
Yep.
So
And it just so happens that my three favorite local housing advisors, their names all start with A. Just a coincidence, but it's a neat little package.
let's talk about some pitfalls. What are some common mistakes or oversights you've noticed individuals or families make when crafting their care plans, and how can these be avoided?
So I think sometimes the priorities are wrong, or they are putting things off, shoving things under the rug, so to speak, because, again, the family members in question are saying, no, I don't want you involved, I'm not moving, blah, blah, so forth. I think it's how you frame things instead of, oh, I'm going to come in, I'm going to take over, and, you're going to like it, or you're going to have to deal with it. That's not going to work very well. I used to like to say that, I don't think he's listening, the only thing that my brother, a musician, played better than Mom was his keyboards. Or better than his keyboards was Mom. He kind of manipulating it. It's a long story, a little codependency going on there. But I was able to manipulate Mom a bit, but in her best interest, for her welfare. For instance, before the storm, her papers were sitting on the table to file her taxes, which she used to be really good at. She would get them all together and she'd bring them to the CPA just to make sure everything was in order. But they were not moving. They were just sitting there on the table. And I said, hey, Mom, how would you like me to come down there and help you with the taxes? Oh, I love that. And basically she was saying, I'm glad I thought of it.
Exactly.
So I just framed it so that she could be on board. She could say, well, I'm not being imposed upon. He's not coming in and taking over or taking charge. Fortunately, we had a very close relationship, and she trusted me. So that was good. But I think, again, it's how you frame it, how you talk to your family members, have the conversation. It may take a team meeting first together without the parents or parent, and then possibly talking to them. It may have to be some kind of an intervention or saying, hey, we're really concerned, blah, blah, so forth, and here's some things we think that might be in your best interest because we don't want to see you end up getting sick and or injured, et cetera. And safety in the home is a big one. If you're going to stay in your home, I mean, what's job one besides the legal stuff? Safety.
Yeah.
Right.
And
that includes financial.
Yeah, exactly. And making sure that you have the funds to be able to pay for it long term. Just something as simple as, we've spent, and we've talked about this on the show before when we're talking to like home modification experts. So many homes were built as that colonial two-story, type of house in the 90s and 2000s. And so, believe it or not, there are a lot of people who don't live in a ranch style house, right?
Right.
And something as significant or as simple maybe as a stair lift can really help people stay in their home.
coincidentally, we're right across the street from me, and it didn't exist when we moved into our house, and Mom hadn't started her journey yet. It wasn't evident. Is a care community, besides having skilled rehab and assisted living, are independent, living in place, aging in place cottages. Most of them are one level, but there are a few second level, but they have a small elevator for those who either now or will need a wheelchair or otherwise, or just even using a walker. So there's a lot of forethought there, and it's a wonderful community.
Yeah.
And a community, of course, is not just buildings, it's the people. And they're great. They're great. I love helping
Bill,
them.
when you're building and connecting with the support network, how should caregivers incorporate this into their care plan, and why is it so important?
To build support into the care plan?
Yeah, when you're building and connecting with the support network.
Well, I think I sometimes like to use an example. It was our experience that right after the hurricane, we were collaborative. We were all had to get my mother and stepfather back on track, because they had lost virtually everything, and then it became kind of tag team, collaborative, sequential, to take turns taking care of them before she came out here. She separated from my stepfather in the interim, and then it became more solitary. Me, the primary guy, handling everything with a little help from my family at a distance, and one aunt moved out here to help take care of her. So, and family is how you define or design it. Right. I don't know if you've heard of the Savvy Caregiver classes through Emory University. There was an evidence-based program. They talk about this. And it can be not just your family. It can be your neighbors. It can be your friends, ex-coworkers, your charitable organization like a church or Lions or Elks, things like that. So there's a lot of ways you can gain support. And sometimes I think the biggest problem is people are afraid to ask. They're so proud, or they want to be a burden, or they want to be independent. So ask for and gain support where you can get it. I was fortunate, as opposed to some other families, where my aunts had a lot of opinions, and I certainly listened, but they knew what? My name was on the power of attorney. I had the final say. But they also knew that I had Mom's best interest at heart. So it worked out very well. But of course, there are situations where, and these are the other caregiving types, where people are at a distance, or they're providing unsolicited advice, and it may be misinformed advice on how to handle things. And that's not in your loved one's best interest, because they really don't know, or they're really not doing it. But there are ways of handling that.
When you were building this care plan and this network, of close friends and family members, was it just family, or did you have to reach out to a neighbor or someone that may not be either extended or directly related to you?
I can give a lot of other examples because I've seen with clients and in my support groups, but since this is personal with me, I will mention a couple of things. One was when she did have to go into memory care across the street in this care community. What we did was put Mom into the adult day program on site for a few hours, and with the help with friends, including a truck, etc. Most of her stuff ended up in my garage again. Kept happening. And then what little she had that could go into her memory care space, moved it into the care facility. And of course, I took good care of them, bought them pizza and beer afterwards. Kind of like the traditional move thing, right? But we, and then took Mom into the memory care and took her on a little tour. Isn't this nice, Sheila? Yeah, okay, great. This looks nice. I'll add on to that. What happened was my wife and I went to lunch. Thought, oh, that went surprisingly well, except we made a mistake. We went back. And she saw me and said, how dare you move me without my permission? She wasn't quite ready to grasp that. But she adjusted, and unfortunately she did get out of memory care a couple times because she was still a little smarter than the average bear. Another one that I love to talk about, and I just posted on this on social media, was sometimes you just have to ask. There's so many different things that we deal with, and this is a kind of a lighthearted version of it. The last couple of days, Mom's on hospice before she passed away. Happens to be a norovirus quarantine.
Oh, wow.
The only people that were in the building besides their staff and the residents were my aunt and I. And the care was exceptional. As I like to say, the coffee was institutional. I got on social media and I said, could somebody please bring me a mocha?
I love it.
2 different friends from 2 different coffee stands, Dutch Bros and Starbucks, little plug here, and showed up at the front desk with the coffee for me. And I am forever indebted. I just thanked them again this week, because sometimes they don't know what to do, how you can need help, and sometimes you just need to ask. And that's part of that support plan, because emotionally or otherwise, those same people were supporting me. They knew what I was going through.
You know, it takes a village, and we talk about this in almost every single episode, but caregiving is one of the most demanding roles a person will experience in their life. Mm-hmm. In your opinion, how can a care plan incorporate strategies for caregivers to practice self-care and avoid burnout?
Yeah, huge issue. And of course, then there's the flip side for the healthcare workers and therapists, and like what I do is the compassion fatigue. They're very closely related, but a different focus, different person. And I certainly was feeling the burnout side, because here I am dealing with all these issues, including Mom's care, and I'm holding down a full-time job, and I had a narcissistic micromanager boss.
Good golly.
So you can imagine where my stress level, my blood pressure was during that time period. So the first thing I did, and I think I alluded to this earlier, after the storm, was contacted the Alzheimer Association, found a support group. There weren't as many back then in the mid-2000s than we have now. But I found one that was in the evening during the week so I could attend, because I was working. And I always say is that if that had not been a good experience, where I got the support and it was confidential, it was safe, great tips, great advice, great people, some who had already lost their loved ones and were still coming to help others through the journey, I, again, wouldn't be sitting here today. I probably would have walked away and said, after Mom died, and said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm burned out. I'm exhausted.
And so
6
many
months
people.
later, and 6 months later, I became the facilitator. And that's, I'm still facilitating that same group 18 years later.
I mean, so many people go to that stage of burnout because the experience itself can be so traumatic.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
And
you're losing your loved one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then on top of it, you may be losing your own health because you're neglecting it.
Yeah.
Or mental and physically.
Well,
so
and you said, as Katrina happened, it exacerbated her disease because the stress of losing her home and everything, made things so much worse, progressed it so much quicker. And so when you're caregiving for somebody and you're losing your loved one, that is also increased stress,
Yep. And besides that, I found a very good counselor to talk about my issues, besides how I was handling everything with Mom and with my family, and trying to get away from the narcissistic boss, trying to get out of that job. It was a good job. It was a good job. No, I actually retired from it 6 years ago. Fortunately, the one good thing that happened was that boss retired a few months after Mom passed away.
Oh, great.
So overall, my stress level did come down to a nice level. The last couple of years was tolerable. But the counseling, but also it gets in self-care means different things to different people. And besides getting away from my desk and walking around the building and clearing my head and getting a little fresh air and getting some exercise, they started having chair massages there at work. And I took advantage of during my break on a regular basis. And then I found a local massage therapist and started going to that person, what I realized was two things. One, and we've heard a variation of this, self-care is not selfish. I started to say it's vital. And that getting the massage was not a luxury, it was a necessity. It's something I really needed, and I still do it to this day.
So let's summarize, because I think one of the main points as we're talking is how you need to approach a care plan from an emotional aspect, not just from the perspective of the client, of the person receiving care, but also from the person that's actually going to be in charge or providing the care. And I think that emotional component stretches probably close to the top of the list, right under the legal documents, of course. How should a care plan address the emotional needs of both people?
I guess the best thing, I mean, you're summing it up real there, but as far as the detail, and there are so many different components involved, and that's what I like to do with my clients, not just take care of one thing, but do you have all the legal documents in place so you do have peace of mind that you can advocate for not just your loved one, but also for yourself.
Absolutely.
And advocate, whether it's at the doctor or at the care facility or with the home care agency. Those aspects. We move forward to, okay, what are there any ongoing issues besides dementia that need to be taken care of? Should we be looking at some of the housing? And they may be rural. There may be very few options.
Right.
Most of the places, anywhere from the independent living to the adult care homes, are mostly centered around large population centers.
Exactly.
You get out into rural America, their options are much fewer, and that's sad. So that would add to somebody's stress. What do I do? Do I give up my job? And how do I deal with that? How do I pay for it? How do I take care of mom and dad or other family members that's not going to bankrupt me?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I was fortunate that mom had a certain amount of income, certain amount of assets, but then that got spent down and she went on Medicaid. I was fortunate that the local caseworker said, okay, I hear your situation. You're going to be setting up a trust to keep her eligible. Move her. We'll take care of the paperwork later, which shocked me because I've always heard that applying for Medicaid was a horror show.
It is.
Right. So, yes, it was a perfect storm that I had to take care of Medicaid and move mom into memory care. But fortunately, my relief was probably obvious to those around me that it could have been a lot worse. So that's where all that getting support, taking care of myself mentally and physically was so important, and I preach this so much to people. And to not have a care plan, and that includes a plan A, B, C. Look at all the what ifs.
Great point.
And have that care team in place. Recently I had and it's still ongoing. I can't get into too many details. It might become obvious to somebody who's listening, where I have a client who's, I'll say, out of the country. She's originally from Portland, but her family, her mother and stepfamily are here in Portland, and mom was stuck in memory care at this very large buy-in independent living with very few assisted living, very few memory care spaces. And because she wasn't getting the attention and the care she needed from the family, from the care facility, from her physician, etc., something as simple as B12 shots.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was stuck in memory care, and she shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
She was imprisoned, basically. And because this new client got a hold of me and I was able to put together the care team and the care plan, she is now out of that facility in another place, and she's never going to be completely happy. She's still kind of isolated, but she's not in a lockdown memory care. She's in a place where she can walk the grounds and see the ducks and the koi fish and the chickens and the beautiful flowers. We're in the Rose City here, so and views of Mount Hood, and so she's a lot happier.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's an ongoing story, but by putting together those meetings with the care team, we got her on the right track. And that's better not only for the mom, but the daughter.
So before we wrap up, I want to ask you kind of a technical question because I am really curious. Since you have this experience with developing a directory and a network to establish a successful and a holistic care plan, if you consider other industries in the United States, nothing is as complicated as the long-term care space. More importantly, there aren't any companies that are actually vertically integrated. So like a hospital doesn't offer nursing home services, doesn't offer healthcare, doesn't offer home health care, or all the other components of long-term care, right? You know, you buy a car, you go to the dealership, you buy the car from the dealership, you get the car serviced at the dealership, you trade the car in at the dealership to get a new car, you get tired, you get it all done at this one spot.
Right.
Two questions. One, from your journey of developing this network, do you ever get frustrated at how different not only the services are, but how different every single state is in terms of services and the providers in each state? And then my second question is, do you feel like it's getting better? That access to service is getting better, that the integration of services, creating somewhat of a one-stop shop for people to be able to either age in place, live in the community in an adult care home, or be in a facility, whether it's assisted living or nursing home. Do you feel like that's improving?
What's very important, and the short answer is I think it's getting better, but we got a long way to go.
Yeah.
I usually talk about my first major industry, which is similar, was hospitality. I was primarily a banquet manager, worked in some very nice hotels. The problem is that in most cases, that's what people want to be at a hotel. They don't want to be in assisted living, et cetera, unless they have to. But I think they actually do even a better job, because what do they have on the property? Everything you could possibly want, right? From lodging and the pool and the food and the spa and a concierge and everything else. Depends upon the property. But yeah, there's so much disparity across our industry in terms of consistency and service and doing the right job, again, holistically, for our most vulnerable population. You brought up a very good point about different states. I mean, like one state I'm thinking not far from here that doesn't even allow the placement specialists, the senior housing advisors.
It's crazy.
People are on their own.
Yeah.
You got to do, as I used to say back when I was first time with Mom, is like let your fingers do the walking through the yellow pages and good luck. And how do you know who's good, right? So at least you can, if you have professionals like that have good training and they've got a good network and they've got a good heart, those are the people I work with, then you know that your clients are going to be taken care of. Whether it's saying, okay, work with so-and-so, they'll take good care of you and find the right fit, the right place, as opposed to somebody else who is just going to be looking for the quick buck, where the place that they always put people and where their friends are. That's not the people I work with.
Do you ever find capacity issues? Meaning like because good providers usually fill up really quickly. And as more and more people are aging, there's less beds available for people that need them. The supply just can't meet the demand.
Well, I think the biggest problem, of course, is Medicaid beds. Yes. We know that.
Right.
Yeah, that's obvious.
Yeah.
And it depends upon the place. There's usually other options. It may be hard to find, let's say if they're looking for, even though there's many of them, the adult care homes, not be hard to find the right place that it fits their specific needs.
Right.
Like I'm talking to somebody right now where their loved one needs a catheter 3 times a day.
Yep.
Most care homes aren't going to take care of that.
Right.
Needs to be a nurse on staff all the time.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a problem. And we need better solutions for those. Yeah, it's hard to take care of every single person's needs. We try to get as close as we can, find the best possible solution. But that's where asking the right questions and having a network and people who know their jobs are going to have a big heart, not just to try, okay, I got to take care of this as quick as possible, make my sale and move on. Again, I'm not going to work with people like that. Who's going to take that initiative to go above and beyond? I'm going to give a quick example of one of my A-team housing advisors. I remember it was a friend of the family, somebody who's I network here locally, father is FTD, going on Medicaid, almost impossible to find a bed. This one housing advisor happened to be out in Central Oregon on vacation, had COVID, and she's and she doesn't get paid for a Medicaid bed,
right?
And she's making phone calls to all these places until she found one just outside of Portland, and that's why I work with that person, because I know she's going to do that for my clients, whether she gets paid or not.
Yeah,
which is fantastic, and she's good. That's a big heart.
I just feel like at this point we need some macro policy making, because CMS does a good job with Medicare and taking care of individuals over the age of 65, but there's this component of long-term care that really needs a lot of resources pulled together and needs a concrete and solid direction. You know, that needs people to be able to make the fundamental decisions and create the foundation so that we're not working compartmentalized. It can't be a state by state by state by state by state.
Right.
It has to be a centralized policy of how long-term care should work. So,
and with that in mind, we all know that one of the big problems right now is finding enough good staff for whether it's in a care facility, care community, or an agency, finding enough aides. And we're not paying them enough for what they do.
Right.
And some places are charging more and more and not paying that staff enough. And finding good people for that is really difficult. And the problem is that, well, let's go back to the unpaid caregivers, the families, millions of them, and talking about billions of dollars of unpaid care. I mean, if they weren't doing that, where would we be?
Exactly.
Our country needs to find new and better sources because it is a growing national problem. We keep shoving it under the. We're talking about it more, not enough. Whether it's through insurance or government programs, some other sources that is going to fix this problem, because it's not going away. It's only going to get worse.
Absolutely. So we always like to end the show with a call to action. Will you share 3 resources or tools that could be helpful for our listeners who are beginning their journey in building a care plan and how they can get started today?
First, I think, one is, like I said, job one is usually make sure the legal documents are in place. Make sure you have the authority and the power to make decisions when they can no longer make them themselves.
Absolutely.
Number 2, make sure that they are safe and getting good care, and they are as happy as can be wherever they are, even before you maybe bring in care or look at other housing. And third, for yourself, combination, go to a support group. Highly recommended. There are usually, if not locally in person, you can probably find a virtual group somewhere in the country. I have a group that I've been doing for about 6 years. It's actually weekly.
Wow.
And it was in the care community across the street. During the pandemic, we went virtual, but as things reopened, I didn't want to cut off the people that are joining me from anywhere from Massachusetts to Hawaii. So I'm alternating each week, not hybrid, but alternating each week in person and virtually, so that those people can still join us. And in my groups, some are specialized by age or gender or relationship or what have you. I always say we take all ages, all genders, all relationships, all types of dementia, and all stages. We get all comers. So I have people from their 30s to their 80s, and they all support each other, and it's really gratifying and heartwarming.